Hey, it's New Thought Talk. I'm your host, the Reverend Steve Walling from the Spiritual Awareness Center located in beautiful Fresno, California, the heart of the Central Valley. Central Valley is the heart of the state of California, and a lot of heart going on here, and I'm glad you're with us today. Excuse me a second. It's a great day. Started out a great day because before I opened my eyes, I claimed today as being great, and I hope you did too. We have the opportunity and the option each and every day to determine how we're going to address the day, and we can choose to address it from a position of control and greatness, or we can choose to allow it to unfold, and we are just become, at that point, kind of a victim of circumstance. So I hope you chose to take control of your day. There is a power and a presence for good in the universe. That's something that we pay very close attention to in New Thought and Religious Science in Mind. Last week I started on something I haven't normally done, on a teaching from, this was the extension study course. It happened to be course 30 out of the set of 48 lessons. But in the meantime, while I was doing some research this last week, I realized that this same thing, it can be found in Living the Science of Mind. So if you don't have the extension study course, if you have Living the Science of Mind, it's on page 318. And we're talking about spiritual mind treatment is not well-wishing. And when we talk to people outside of science of mind and we begin to explain this concept of spiritual mind healing, affirmative prayer treatment, oftentimes, they kind of give you that look, and it's like they're wondering exactly what you're talking about, and is this really real stuff? And it is real. And it does demonstrate and manifest in our lives. And so as we begin to walk our spiritual path, set out on our spiritual journey, so to speak, we learn that we can begin to affect how we relate to circumstances in our life, and how, as life unfolds, we can find the good in basically everything that comes our way. That's a powerful tool when you begin to understand that life comes at us at the speed of life. I said that many times. But how we respond to it, how we choose to interact with it, really determines our experience of life. And the idea of being able to experience life at a higher, more genuine, more harmonious and happy level 24/7, It sounds like almost too good to be true, but it's not. You see, that's the gift that was given to us when we were created. When the Creator said at some point that this individualized aspect of me is going to present itself on the physical plane, and it has gifted us with everything we can need, want, and desire to express ourselves fully. But we have to find that out. We have to make that connection, and then we have to begin our spiritual journey. And our spiritual journey is a spiritual journey of unfolding and embodying the truth of who we are. In the process of doing that, we find out that often as we've grown up, because usually, I mean, truth be told, this is nothing that most of us get when we're very little. We come to it usually as an adult or maybe a young adult, oftentimes later in life. But when we come to it, we realize that how awesome this is, how powerful this is, what a great idea. But look at where I'm at in my life today. And we can look around ourselves and, some of us can see a lot of stuff, and some of us can see maybe not so much stuff, maybe some good stuff. But all of us can see that there's more to life than what we're experiencing. And you see, that's the beauty and the understanding that we get when we realize that this gift of life was given to us by a divine principle, by the one life, by God, however you want to understand the creative force of the universe. It was gifted to us, and in that gift, our gift back to it is basically expressing it to the best of our ability with the tools that we have. But the tools that we have oftentimes are tools that we're not aware of. The tools that we have are the tools of choice, the tools of realizing, and that's important, the tools of realizing, the tools of imagination, the tools of spirituality, the tools of faith, and all these are available to each and every one of us. But they just sit on the shelf, so to speak, until we address them. So last week, what I did was I started teaching from this lesson, and it's entitled that Spiritual Mind Healing. Let me get this right. Get it out of the book. Spiritual mind healing is not well-wishing. Spiritual mind treatment is not well-wishing. Spiritual mind treatment, spiritual mind healing, affirmative prayer treatment. They all talk about and represent the same thing. That when we take the time and we calm our mind, when we allow the static of the day to just sit, when we become mindful in this moment, in this presence, and we begin to open ourselves up to an idea of an infiniteness. We call it God or Spirit. We call it First Cause. We call it Goddess. But we allow ourselves to become aware that it just is. It just is. And as its isness, if you will, it is expresses expressively as us, as an individual being. That we're not alone. We're not apart. We're not left to fend for ourselves. That, as Jesus said, our Father. Okay, and if you want to look at it as a father, a mother, parent, it's a good way to look at it, but it's not the way that you have to look at it, but it's a good way. That parenting consciousness is there and is available to us. That there's a love there, a presence there that never leaves us, even if we feel like we've been left and feel like we're separate from. So we begin our journey, and we've started making connections with New Thought, with Science of Mind and Spirit, and we're moving along, and we come up to this understanding that there's this affirmative prayer treatment, affirmative spiritual treatment, however it may have been introduced, spiritual mind healing. Truth be told, that it really was from the foundation of spiritual mind healing that New Thought really began its incarnation in this physical plane. There's various different organizations that grew up around the concept of spiritual mind healing, and they evolved, and religions came into being because there's a very deep and very powerful spiritual connection that once you begin to realize that we're not dealing with something out there, but we're dealing with something so intimate to us that we can never be separate from it, that it responds to us, it responds to our choices, it responds to our thoughts, and as a matter of fact, it responds to us all the time, even when we're not aware of it. And oftentimes that's what begins our life experience into things that we find a little bit difficult. Because we've grown up through our youth and oftentimes young adulthood, being exposed to all sorts of limiting, negative, sometimes hostile, angry thoughts and consciousness. I mean, if you grew up in a home where the news was on every evening, you got to know life's really tough. If you grew up in a family where you were constantly not recognized for the greatness that you are, you may have grown up with a feeling of limitedness as far as your personal being, that maybe you're not as good as, and whatever you define not as good as to, that's not true. Because there is no not as good as when we look at the infiniteness as all an expression of God. So that you are, and everybody else in your experience, is an equal expression of the divine principle expressed as the individual. We call that you. And so you've begun to step out, and you're introduced to this thing called spiritual mind treatment. And what you'll begin to learn and understand is that this is a form of prayer, meditation, that when we embody it for ourselves, or when we have somebody that is skilled in the ability of using it, use it for us specifically, that things unfold, that there's a law that responds when truth is known in mind, and when truth is known in mind anywhere, it's known in mind everywhere. When we begin to realize that dis-ease and lack and limitation are not expressions of divine principle, but they are conditions that basically have resulted from man's consciousness, man's inability to treat man in a positive and good way. And that comes from all sorts of things, including history. And history has given us what we call race consciousness. And I've talked about that in the past, where the concepts of unequalness and limitation and disease are prevalent throughout the consciousness of humanity. And if we accept those as part of our own consciousness, we experience them in our life. But we don't have to. And that's the promise, if you will, that's the gift. So we started off last week talking about spiritual mind healing, and you can find that in the archives if you're a subscriber to the New Thought channel. It was the July 5th episode, July 5th. It'll be up soon if it's not up already, and you can go there and get the first part. Like I say, it's based on a supplemental thing to the 30th lesson in the Holmes course, or it can be found on page 318 in the Living New Thought, or Living Science of Mind. I want to go back here, and I want to read something. He says, looking away from the appearance, and this is kind of where we left off, looking away from the appearance, what we see with our eyes or experience with our five senses, right? No matter what appearance may be, the turning to reality, and he capitalizes reality. Our statements are made to conform with the realities felt. God is all there is. Therefore, this negative condition need not be and should not and is not. If you have not had the opportunity to experience demonstration through spiritual mind treatment, this may be a little bit of a stretch for you. And this is why last week when I talked about the need for spiritual experience becomes so important. And Holmes talks about this in the Science of Mind. As a matter of fact, in the end of the general summary, you'll find it on page 423, where he says that he would rather have a student put this into practice than to learn all the words of wisdom, because again, if we get it between our ears and we don't express it in our consciousness and our beingness, we don't really know that it'll work. We only know at the level that we can see it demonstrated in our own lives. I mean, someone can tell us, but if they tell us, it's not our experience, and we don't have that embodied knowingness. Once we begin to practice, and if you're new to this concept, maybe keep your practices at a don't try to eat the whole elephant at once, so to speak. Work at maybe things that you can raise your belief level in a little bit beyond where you believe now, but maybe not so far beyond where you can't believe that it can be demonstrated in your life. Sometimes that can be tough. Some people, when they have very poor self-images and they just think that they're worthless, and I'll just put it in those terms. No way, nothing is worthless. We are all creators, or creations of the divine creator. That can't be worthless. It can only be great. But we've got to shift our consciousness, shift our mindset from this average, worthless, less than, limited, whatever, to the realization of greatness, because we are expressions of the greatness of all that is. It's an amazing thing as you begin to make this shift, as you see these things unfold. It comes through working, and as I've talked about in the past, our daily spiritual practices. I want to read something to you. Let's see, I believe it's in here. And this little book is entitled The Hidden Power of the Bible by Ernest Holmes. And under the title of The Secret of Prayer, Holmes writes, "The secret of prayer and its power in outward life depends upon unconditioned faith in and reliance upon this inner presence." The inner presence. The divine is not outside of us. It is within us. Oftentimes we refer to it as God within or the Christ within. It doesn't make any difference how you refer to it. It's that essence that is at the basis, the center of your being, and it's there. And it's there to be realized, it's there to be communed with, and it's there to be expressed as we begin to learn and grow spiritually. He says we must enter the closet. That is, we are to shut out all else and enter the precinct of spirit in quietness and confidence, believing. Prayer has power, not through repetition, and this is important, not through repetition, not through willpower, not through concentration, not through trying to memorize, okay? It has power by belief and acceptance. Belief and acceptance. And it's easy to say, but getting there, that's part of the spiritual path. That's why spiritual experience becomes important, because to get to that level of acceptance of a greater truth, we have to have some understanding of how that comes about. He says prayer is to be simple, direct, and receiving. We are to believe that God indwells our own life and that this divine presence is sufficient for all needs. Not some needs, not part needs, but all needs. Life comes at us at the speed of life, but the divine principle, God is always with us. We're never alone. We are to believe that God will provide for and bless us abundantly. And when we enter this secret place, we are to leave all else behind, all hate, animosity, and vindictiveness, worry, anxiety, the list goes on. Anything that is not in alignment with what you might call divine principle, which basically is expressed as love, peace, harmony, goodness, wholeness, happiness. Anything less than that limits us, and we need to let it go. He says we are to forgive and forget all that cannot be all. We are to forgive and forget all, because that cannot enter into heaven. For only in doing this ourselves can we enter. It's an amazing thing when you realize that this work to be done is to be done within each and every one of us individually. And as we do that, we change. And with that change within us, the world begins to change. So we're going to take our first break, and we'll pick it up with world-changing thoughts when we come back. I'll see you then.
Linda Lee Kane is an author of fantasies, thrillers, contemporary fiction, and children's books. Order a book by Linda Lee Kane on Amazon or on lindaleekane.com. Call Paul Bonander of Bonander Real Estate to buy this beautiful 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom home at 3486 Mecca Avenue in Clovis. Call 559-246-6731 for all your real estate needs. The Saga of Bridget and Amanda by Carol Love Forbes brings to life the struggles of historical women in early America. Find The Saga of Bridget and Amanda on Amazon and Barnes & Noble and order your copy today.
I'm Greg Steen, your host for the Truth for Seniors show. Glad you're joining us today and coming to you from Central Valley Talk in the heart of Fresno. So every Wednesday at 2 you can find us, and we'll be here giving you the most up-to-date and accurate information possible, bringing you experts, as we promised, from lots of different fields related to seniors, senior needs, caregiver needs, and everything that goes with that. So if you're looking for the right information and timely information, this is the place to be.
CentralValleyTalk.com.
Okay, when we went to the break, oh, by the way, this is New Thought Talk. I'm your host, the Reverend Steve Walling, from the Spiritual Awareness Center in Fresno, California. I'm glad you're with us today. I hope you're enjoying the show. And moving forward, when I left off at the end of the first segment, I talked about as we change ourselves, this amazing thing happens, that the world changes. And over the years, as I've spent time reading Dr. Holmes's writings and his thoughts and trying to get a handle on how he came about this understanding and how he trained and taught people to put it into practice in their lives and how lives changed and unfolded. One of the very clear concepts that I got was that Holmes clearly believed that through the embodiment of the principles of religious science, science of mind and spirit, that we would change the world. Not by going out and telling the world how to change, but by changing ourselves. Matter of fact, he believed this so strongly that, and I don't remember where it was, but I read that at one place that he said that there will come a day, and he seriously believed this, that there will come a day when enough people know and understand and embody the principles, maybe not the necessary religious beliefs, but the principles of religious science, that the world would change for the better. You know, the world produces more good today than it has in any time in history. And yet you can look out in the world and you see lack, limitation, you see all sorts of atrocities. People look at that oftentimes and they place the emphasis on the negativity. But the world is a much better place to live in today than it was even 50 years ago. And it's going to be a better place tomorrow and each and every day after. And as we take and embody new thought, religious science and mind for ourselves, as we begin to realize that it is within us that we create the reality that we experience, we'll see the world change. I want to read this. This is also from this is from The Hidden Power of the Bible, and this is called World Peace. And Holmes said, "World peace will appear when the nations, realizing that there is good enough to go around, they learn to live together in harmony. This is a matter of self-training among the different peoples and international understanding. This international consciousness is being born of the nations today and will yet shine full-orbed. Then we shall cease to have wars." That's a powerful and awesome thought. Not only ceasing to have wars, but ceasing to have disease and limitation and various sundry of other so-called evils. He said the world is made up of individual members, so we must begin within the unit. We cannot carry discord into harmony, for discord is a lack of the proper appreciation of harmony. As a straight line finds no abiding place in a curve, so discord finds no abiding place in harmony. We cannot carry our troubles to the Spirit, for the Spirit is untroubled. We approach God only through His own nature. And if one wishes to experience peace, he must first become peaceful in his own thought. Careful self-training will do this. Watching one's thought and carefully discarding such mental attitudes that are of a destructive nature. This is possible for all. The divine ear cannot listen to discord, because become peaceful, and you will find peace. And that is the truth for the world today. Become peaceful, and you will find peace in the world. If you are experiencing upset, discord, lack, limitation in your life, there are better answers. There are things that you can do. There's a divine principle that you can turn to that will respond when you turn to it. But you have to make the move. You have to make the choice, and you got to be willing to give up. You got to give up the anger. You got to give up the refusal to accept. You got to give up judgment. You got to give up you versus whatever the other is. Matter of fact, you have to give up the other, because in truth, there really is just one. It's just divine principle, or love, or God, or spirit, however you want to understand it. And everything else is expressed within that. And in order for us to express ourselves in such a way that we experience the good, the love, the harmony, the peace that is, it's not by going out and telling the world what has to be changed in the world for the world to be peaceful. We have to create the change within ourselves. And I guess that's what really hooked me when I first came to this principle. Although there's many other things. I mean, the idea that we can create abundance in our life, the idea that we can, through mind, have control over conditions. There's many other things. But I don't know if it was growing up in the 60s, which maybe dates me a little bit, but the idea of seeing good and peace in the world has always been near and dear to my heart. And maybe that's what sold me. But anyway, regardless, I'm here today, and being here today, I'm sharing what I believe to be maybe not the only message, but an awfully darn good one. So, we're moving along here. He talks about, in this, various ways that we can, within ourselves, create this thing we call a mental equivalent. And that's an image, if you will, and it's an image that we can experience if we happen to be visual in our imagination. We can experience as creating that image, but maybe we're not visual. Well, what do we do if we're not visual? Well, we can still create that image as a sense, as a feeling, as an experience. You know, we all have the ability to read a good book, a story, and get lost in the story and become part of and parcel with the story. And to a certain extent, you can do this with movies, but books really bring it out in the imagination, and we get involved. Well, that same thing that we can bring to reading a good book, a good story, we have the ability to create a story in our own mind, if you will. And the story that we want to create is that story of goodness, of peace, of health, of harmony, of wholeness. And as we do that, and as we grasp that in our consciousness, as we decide that we're going to create this as a reality in our mind, there's a law that responds. This law is the law of cause and effect, if you will. Some parts of it people call the law of attraction, although it's not necessarily just law of attraction, but that is part of it. But we have to bring ourselves in harmony with the divine principle as a whole. Now, Holmes talks about the argumentative method, and what he means is we kind of hold court in our own mind, if you will. You know, we lay out the evidence for, and we make the argument for, and we complete the presentation. We basically create our summation of the good to be expressed. And if we're not harming somebody, if we're bringing good into the world, if it's a desire of our heart that was probably there as a result of God's principle and presence within us, creating that desire for us, at the level of our belief, there's a darn good, very good, excellent chance that we're going to see it demonstrated in our life in some way. It's done unto us as we believe. Building our level of belief in the law that responds to mind is part of our spiritual journey. And so as we daily do our spiritual practices, we spend time in meditation, as we do simple treatments during the day, as we seek to practice the presence of God, of being in the moment throughout the day, being aware of the thoughts that travel through our mind behind our normal consciousness, being aware of what's going on. Is it uplifting? Is it life-affirming? Or is it something of a more negative nature? And if it's more negative, let's address it right then and there. And the more we do that, we develop a habit of doing that. Catching ourselves when we complain and working to change that habit, that complaining habit, because for every complaint that we make, we have created another limitation in our life. We don't think about it, we just think about it as being disagreeable in the moment. But in truth, we're training our mind to accept and to see more and more to complain for, because the law always responds. If we want to complain, the law says, I'll give you more to complain about. That's kind of the way it unfolds. So we begin to be aware, we begin to be conscious of what we're doing. So we can argue the point within ourselves that there is a divine perfection that is expressed as me on a spiritual level. And if that divine perfection is expressed as me on a spiritual level, then the difference between the spiritual level and what I'm experiencing in this physical plane is something that has caused a limitation in my physical expression, and that something is based in some way in mind. And if it's based in mind, and the currency of mind, if you will, is thought, then what is in mind is thought can mold, modify, or erase, or change at the level that we believe. It's a powerful thought. He says, A combination of feeling the divine presence and making statements in the law of mind constitutes both inspirational and scientific spiritual mind treatment. Why does he say scientific? And why is it called science of mind, or religious science, or divine science? The reason why the founders of these various New Thought philosophies use science in the name, and I've addressed this probably in shows past, but at the time, and this is the turn of the 19th to the 20th century, science was unfolding so many exciting things. You know, we were going from the Industrial Revolution into something even more greater. The whole consciousness of the Western world was changing, and the ability to experience more good in our life, not having to work 7 days a week, and realizing the power of the mind in creating our life expression. When they're looking at science, they realize that science is a process of methods, that if you follow this particular process of this particular method and you get a particular result, then anybody else that does the same thing should get the same result. And what they realized, and they began to understand, that in the spiritual world, that there are principles that if you put those principles into practice, that no matter who the who is, at the level that you put them into practice of faith and belief, at that level you will see a demonstration. So they addressed it more as an idea of science, that what anyone could do, if someone else learned that same method and process, they could do the same thing. In today's world, it's a little dated and antiquated, but the idea is still true. It still holds. You know, that there are principles, and you put those principles into practice in your life, and you will see a demonstration at the level of your belief and understanding. And it doesn't vary. So he goes on to say, therefore it is plain that such treatment is not well-wishing, hoping, or longing. It is not a petition. It is a bold, flat, definite, predetermined statement, concise, clear, and dynamic. In other words, when you make your statement in mind, when you go to that inner space, that inner quietness within yourself, and you begin to create that mold, if you will, that mental equivalent, and you begin to declare that that is a truth, and you understand that is truth, and you believe that is truth, and it is in alignment and does bring good into your world and into the world as a whole, maybe into other people's life experiences, that there is a law that responds. That's the way the science unfolds, and it is definite. And so I'm looking at the clock. We're going to take our next break. We'll pick it up when we come back. I'll see you then.
Prepare to be amazed by the magic of Elder. Kyle Elder is a fantastic entertainer who has been studying magic for over 20 years. Book Kyle and the Magic of Elder for your event, large or small. Kyle will make you laugh and mesmerize you with his magic. For more information or a free quote, visit magicofelder.com or call 559-917-4543. Kristen McIntosh is a real estate broker who prides herself on providing the highest level of service to her customers. Her enthusiasm for achieving desired results is an asset to her clients. Contact Kristen at 559-419-0333 and visit KristenMcIntosh.com. Voir dire, An Oath to Tell and Seek the Truth by Santiago Camarena, depicts the vicious cycle of drugs, crime, and incarceration. It argues that the media, politics, and our laws systematically contribute to this cycle. Get your copy of Voir dire at VoirDireStory.com. Connect with Dr. Alan Hedberg. Watch Doctor Teach Me to Parent on CentralValleyTalk.com Saturdays at 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. Listen to The Psychology Report anytime at thepsychologyreport.buzzsprout.com. Visit booksbyhedberg.com and order a book for your personal growth. And join the conversation on twitter.com/AlanGHedberg.
CentralValleyTalk.com.
Welcome back to New Thought Talk. I'm your host, the Reverend Steve Walling from the Spiritual Awareness Center, located in Fresno, California, and we're talking about spiritual mind treatment. We're talking about it not being well-wishing, and we're talking about some of the aspects, if you will, of what's involved. And before we went to the break, I read, it is not a petition. It is a bold, flat, definite, predetermined statement, concise, clear, and dynamic. Now, I don't know if you're from a position in life where prayer has been put in those particular terms. And if you're not, I want you just to kind of pause and reflect on what that is. I'm going to read it again. It is not a petition. It is a bold, flat, definite, predetermined statement, concise, clear, and dynamic. All the different aspects and the things that we would use in creating an image in mind, this thing that we call a mental equivalent. And he goes on to say, but we hasten to add, it is not as though a large amount of good were now to be hurled and an equal amount of evil. In other words, we're not looking at something that we consider evil or lack or limited in our life, and we're going to hurl good at it. And if we hurl enough good at it, we're going to overpower the so-called evil or limitation with the force of what we're hurling at it. It is, he says, not something not storming the gates of heaven with an affirmative petition. It is more like the calm contemplation of the mind, which says there is a light, and because there is, darkness disappears. You know, darkness is not a thing of itself. Darkness cannot overpower light. A light of a single candle can take any darkness and bring light to it. It cannot be stomped out, extinguished, because darkness is not a thing. Now, this is how to use the science of mind. I want to read this to you because this is particular to what we're talking about today. He says, it is useless to make statements in spiritual mind treatment that we do not inwardly believe. All statements must flow out of a consciousness of conviction. The words used are merely spontaneous expressions of our inward beliefs about life. In other words, it's done unto us as we believe is the basic premise from where we start. If you cannot believe that greater good can be expressed in your life, then that's where you have to start, with that belief that greater good cannot be expressed in your life. Don't try to move forward into something bigger, greater, like I say, the elephant in the room. Let's start with the basic belief. One, if you understand that you are the divine principle expressing as you, if you care to explain to me what part of that is less than great, then we can talk about it. But if you can't find anything in the understanding of God as principle or spirit as wholeness, that nowhere, no place is it not the great and the good, regardless of the judgments you may put upon it. You have to think about this. You are an expression of the divine principle. Can't be any other way. As that expression, you're never less than anything. Now, we assign ourselves a lot of less than this because we've learned that growing up. And I talked about that earlier. But as we go into that silent space, as we begin to treat for ourselves this process, as we speak the statements, knowing the truth of the statements we speak. I did a treatment earlier today for a young lady that was in the hospital. I don't know her. Her mom contacted me, and I did treatment for her. And it was never about anything other than recognizing the truth of who this young lady is, that she is whole, perfect, and complete, and that's kind of a catchphrase that's often used. But understanding that not as a catchphrase, but as a realization, before I spoke those words, I knew that as a creation of the divine principle, that this person could not be anything less than whole, perfect, and complete, because God does not make less than. God is fullness, abundance. God is wholeness. Making that realization in my mind, knowing that truth for this particular person, knowing that as I know it in my mind, it's known in the mind of God, because there is but one mind, and that is God's mind, but it is also my mind and your mind. It's the mind we use. Knowing it at such a level that it is a reality within me that I cannot accept, I cannot understand anything less than that perfection as that person. and it's amazing. But we get to this part of treatment that when you get to that as a realization, not as words spoken, but as a realization, when you get to that as a knowingness, a wholeness, an acceptedness of all that it means and the goodness that it is that's expressed in life, we move to the next part of this, which is a part that we call giving thanks or thanksgiving or the gratitude part. Being overwhelmed with gratitude and knowing the truth for someone, the greatness of the expression of God, the happiness, the wholeness, and the harmony. It's an amazing feeling. But when you get to that point in your treatment, when you move beyond well-wishing, when you get to an understanding of the reality of the truth at which you speak, that sense of gratitude, that sense of thanksgiving, it's there. And again, I can talk to you about this, but you have to experience it to really get the understanding. So that's why I spent last week and taking time this week going over this, and it's kind of a two-parter, but the thing is that it's important that you have the power, that there is a power and a presence for good in the universe, and it is available to you, and you can use it at the level that you believe. And when we say at the level that you believe, it's not like that's a limiting factor, that you can only get this much and you can't go beyond, because you can grow your beliefs. But you only grow your beliefs through continually working on expanding them. I've often said that what you believe today, you didn't believe before, and that's true. At one time, your whole world revolved around the family that you lived in and probably the house, and you didn't have an understanding of outside because you'd never been outside as an independent being. But at some point, you get through the front or the back door and you get out in the yard, and all of a sudden your belief about the world has changed drastically. It's expanded. Then at some time you end up at school and you learn to grow in consciousness. You learn to believe new things. And it moves on as we move through life. Our beliefs have changed tremendously through life. Unfortunately, there are certain beliefs that once embedded in the mind, and usually these are limiting beliefs, that they stay with us at a level that we're not aware of, but they're there. And you know that they're there because you look out at your life and you see the limitation that you're experiencing. And if it's done unto you as you believe, if you're experiencing limitation at some level in your life, then yeah, you've got a belief in limitation. But that's not the end-all be-all, because you can move beyond that. But you don't move beyond it just by saying, I'm going to move beyond it. You don't move beyond it by having somebody telling you that you can move beyond it. You move beyond it by the doingness. Ernest Holmes used to say, we treat and move our feet. Well, that moving our feet is that spiritual growth that we have to be responsible for. I know people, and this was brought to mind recently. We talk about we create our own reality. And again, that's another one of those catchphrases. But so many times people look out in the world and they're familiar with New Thought, religious science, and they say, if we create our own reality, why are or why is, and they'll point out either an individual or a group of individuals experiencing this, and why is there no way out for them? As if that group or that individual is condemned to experience and express the limitation and the lack in which they are living in at this point in time. And truth be told, we're all born equally. I mean, we're created equally. We're all created equally, but we're not born equally. And what I mean by that is some of us are born in Beverly Hills, and some of us are born in Haiti, and some of us are born in New England, and some of us are born in Florida, and some south of the border in European countries. And that alone changes the game for everybody, depending on where you're born. But some people are born with physical maladies. Some people are born with brain, mind deformities. That's how we're born. But the thing is, if we're all created equal, then somewhere within each and every one of us is the tools, the basic foundation to transcend wherever we're at. But we only get to that point when we begin to realize that it's available to us, when we begin to realize the power that we truly have. So as we continue to look out and we limit people by our beliefs of them being limited, we'll see more limitation. That's never going to change until we begin to change within ourselves. Like I said at the beginning of the show today, we change the world by changing ourselves, because once we have expressed and experienced that change within ourselves, once we have embodied a greater truth of an expression of belief in divine principle, we realize that not only is it available to me, but it's there in the world for everybody. Then you begin to look at the world through different eyes. You begin to look at the world through a different lens. And it's not that we look at a group or an individual and say that they're stuck by, the grace of their birth or whatever, but we look at them and we know that the gift of God's goodness is within each and every one of them, and that they can make the change. And in that knowingness, already change is beginning to take place. As we begin to expect the world to demonstrate in a greater, higher level, it responds. But it manages, or it's, we have to have the faith within ourselves that that's so. And a lot of people, that faith is not real big, because we get the evening news. We get the, whatever's going on in the neighborhood. We get what's happening in the disasters in the world. And we see that as, that's life, and there's nothing we can do. Even people that are in the New Thought family oftentimes get lost in this concept that things outside of themselves have to be aggressively, forcefully changed in order to make greater things outside of themselves. We got to start with ourselves. We clean up, we demonstrate, we grow within ourselves. There are things that we can do outwardly that will change the world. But until we've made that change within ourselves, we're like the blind leading the blind. We really don't know what the road is that we're trying to travel down. There is a power and a presence for good in the universe, but we have to know it and own it and use it. We're going to take our last break, and I'll see you when we come back.
This 3-bedroom, 2-bath home in Clovis is now for sale. Nestled on a cul-de-sac in a planned unit development, the quiet neighborhood is near Sierra Vista Mall, grocery stores, and Clovis Unified Schools. This well-maintained home, featuring an open kitchen with a breakfast bar, dining area, a family room with fireplace, ceiling fans, vaulted ceilings, and inside laundry room. The large master suite has 2 large closets, a roomy bathroom with shower, and exterior door leading to the patio. Located near the intersection of Gettysburg and Fowler Avenue, call Mike Briggs Properties at 559-486-6758 to buy this home today.
Protect yourself by letting private investigator Michael Morgan Clark get the facts you need in matters of infidelity and divorce, corporate investigations, criminal defense, workers' comp, child parental abduction, wrongfully accused. Michael Morgan Clark will investigate anyone. Call 559-785-1900 or visit clarkinvestigations.com.
CentralValleyTalk.com.
Welcome back to New Thought Talk. I'm your host, the Reverend Steve Walling, from the Spiritual Awareness Center, located in beautiful Fresno, California. Anyway, I was talking about changing ourselves and changing the world. I got a couple things I want to read and close with, some thoughts. First is, continuing on with this particular reading that I'd started with, the practitioner should always know, and by practitioner, we're talking about any person that practices. We're not talking about people that have gone through specialized training. We're talking about anyone that puts into practice the principles. The practitioner should always know that his or her statements transcend not only the physical or objective conditions, but subjective or unconscious causes as well. Those things that we talked about that maybe we hold at levels we're not aware of within ourselves that limit us. Those things, they are transcendent, both the cause and effect of the negative condition, rising to a position in mind which starts new and clean and fresh, and we can bring ourselves and our minds and our consciousness to that level. And how exciting, how wonderful that is, how encouraging it is, that no matter where we're at, there's more good to be had, there's more harmony to be expressed, there's more love to be experienced in our own life. He says this is what Jesus meant when he said, in effect, that there is a truth which known will prove itself. and ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. He recognized a truth transcendent of all negation. That's a powerful thought. It's a thought that each one of us can experience at the level that we choose to experience it. Going to the Science of Mind, and I'm reading on page 332, under individuality, Dr. Holmes writes, the higher sense of truth, with a capital T, the higher sense of truth, the sense of truth, the greater will be the realization of the uniqueness of the individual character and personality. The real self is God-given and cannot be denied. It is the place where God comes to a point of individualized and personified expression. I am the light of the world, and that is you and I, and each and every one of us. If we take a breath in this life, we are breathing God consciousness in and out of ourselves. No place, no space where God is not. How can we look out into the world and see things that we can judge to be less than? I'm talking about individuals. How can we look even within our family and find individuals that we're just not willing to accept, be it because of who they are, their beliefs, or however we've chosen to judge them, however we've chosen to limit ourselves in our judgment. You know, one of the teachings that is often shared is the idea of, judge not, lest ye be judged, and by whatever measure you judge, so shall you be judged. Truth is, when we put ourselves in a position of judgment, we are really judging ourselves at that level. Coming to a point of acceptance of a greater good, a greater truth, a greater reality. That individual or that group that you may have seen yesterday as something to be in opposition of is not really in opposition. They're part of the family of humanity. And maybe they're a factor that we have disagreement with, but all disagreements can be mediated through love, peace, and harmony. And if you don't believe that, it's because you haven't reached that level of belief. Think about it. It's done unto us as we believe. If we can believe in a greater truth, a greater peace, a greater harmony, we can see it in the world. And that's what Dr. Holmes taught. That's what he shared with the world. This idea of spiritual mind healing, spiritual mind treatment creates greater good in our lives, and that's a wonderful thing individually, but it creates a greater world for each and every one of us, and that's a greater good for all of humanity. So when we meet people in our life, or when we meet experiences that are not at the level that we'd want to experience, not at the level of good that we would like to have, instead of throwing up our hands in anger or angst or finding something to complain about, choose to find the good in that moment. And it may be a stretch to begin with. It may be a little bit difficult if you're not used to it, if it's not a habit. But when you begin to look for the good, you'll find it at some level. And as you continue to look for good, you'll develop a habit of seeking out the good in all things. And as you seek out good in all things, you'll begin to realize that all things bring good. Your life experience will change. Happiness, peace, harmony, wholeness is not something that can be imposed upon you from the outside. It's not something that can be provided for you by some condition or some individual. It is a realization of a greater truth that exists within each and every one of us. Sometimes people don't quite get that, but if you ever have the opportunity to look at, like in the earthquakes, the tsunamis they had in Japan a couple years ago, if you look at the pictures of the kids that were in these like big gymnasiums where people had to live for a while because they lost everything, that the kids in there found ways to play and have a good time. And it's not because they're ignorant of what's going on. It's because they're realizing that they can create happiness for themselves. It's one of the truths that Viktor Frankl realized during the awful times that he was in the camps in World War II, that many things can be taken from an individual, but the one thing that can't be taken is the way that they see the world, their attitude, their mental outlook. And those people that understand that they can see good in all things. Not only do they have more goodness to experience, but they have stronger consciousness. They have a happier, more healthful life. But they also have the ability to create and manifest good in the world. And when enough people get to that point, the world is going to change. And that was what Dr. Holmes believed, and I believe that too. So that pretty much covers what I wanted to cover out of this lesson. Spiritual mind treatment is not well-wishing. It's not hoping. It's not asking for something beyond our physical self. It's recognizing a greater truth, seeing that truth in mind, and then seeing the demonstration. Understanding that if we get caught up with our five senses and we think that that's where reality is, just like my hand is limited to these five fingers, so is our reality limited if we believe that what our five senses show us is the only truth. There's a greater reality. We are spiritual beings in a spiritual universe, of which this part of it is a physical experience. But there's so much more. So, if you're new to New Thought, religious science, I encourage you, read and study, that's fine. Take classes, that's fine. But more importantly, spend time every day. Quiet yourself. Just seek to find within yourself a spot of inner peace, because it's there. You'll find it if you look for it. You begin to train the mind. You begin to see greater things. And it really is amazing how that unfolds. Then learn from people. Take what you've learned, put it into practice. Don't try to be a wizard when you're just learning how to walk, so to speak. But don't give up. Commit yourself to it. It will unfold. The promise was given before you took your first breath. But it's up to you to do the work. Religious science, science of mind, New Thought, it's powerful philosophy, it's faith, philosophy, a way of life. It's also tools just to be used in the daily life experience and expression, regardless of how you interact with or understand the divine principle, or whether you believe in it or not. You don't have to. But if you do, there's a lot more that is available to you, but you're not limited totally by lack of belief, so to speak. Find a New Thought center. Find one that, if you can't get to it, that you can at least communicate with. Talk to people. You're welcome to email me, rev.steve11@live.com. Show up Sunday at the Spiritual Awareness Center in Fresno. We're at 1470 North Van Ness, and you can find us there. You can seek us out, like I say, online. My Facebook page, Steve Walling, is there. Spiritual Awareness Center is there. New Thought Talk is there. Now that we're on the New Thought channel, there's a lot of other teachers that you can spend time with on the channel. If you're not a subscriber, I encourage you, look up the New Thought channel and subscribe. There's some very good, and it's wide. It's not just specific like me, but it covers a lot. You'll find me there. But you got to invest the time. You got to take the time. You got to be responsible. That's a big word for a lot of people when we talk about being responsible. Most of us just want to get up in the morning, go through our day, end the day, take a deep breath at night, and go back to bed. But life means so much more when you begin to understand that you are the captain of your fate, the master of your ship, that you can do whatever it is that you want. And it's amazing. You really can, if you believe you can. The good is there. The power is there. Is your commitment there? Is your consciousness there? These are questions that you have to ask. But we all ask them at some point in time. And as we do, we'll find our answers. I look forward to seeing you back when we come back next week. And I hope each week as you go through the week that you embody just a little bit more, that you put a little more into practice, that you see a little more good in your life, that you experience a little greater good and realize that it's the divine principle, it's God demonstrating in your life because you have chosen to see God demonstrating in your life. My friends, it doesn't get any better than that. So I'll see you next week, and until then, know that the light of God surrounds you, the love of God enfolds you, the power of God protects you, and the presence of God watches over you. Because truly, wherever you are, God is there, all is well, and I'll see you next week.
CentralValleyTalk.com